Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Z. I'm a clinical psychologist specializing in adult transgender care. Welcome to my channel. If you have not had a chance yet to subscribe to this channel, please make sure you do so. This way you're going to help so many other people find this free, supportive, and very educational content. And we all know that today, more than ever, my goodness, we really need that. So please do make sure you subscribe. If you have been subscriber to my channel, I very much appreciate your support and your subscription, especially if you stayed with me since the beginning of the channel. So very grateful for all of you. For today's video, I would like to talk about primarily fears you're going to, or a lot of you are experiencing, about stepping into social transition for anybody who identifies as a trans woman. I'm going to give you my number one thing not to do, in my opinion. If you are about to go through social transition, I'm going to give you tips and guidance. Not only how to pay attention to what your fear might be telling you, but also tips and guidance on how to step into social transition that, is my opinion, is going to help you mitigate so many fears you might be experiencing. Now, social transition, in my experience, oftentimes is the most challenging part of transition for so many trans women. And there's a lot of reasons why it is such a challenging part of transition. It is much easier for a lot of individuals to start taking hormones, for example, to just start taking little steps, but it is much harder to start socially present, to start socially show up as your authentic selves. And one of the reasons why it is so challenging is, well, one, it is the time period when you're starting to externalize the woman that you are. And as a result, there is a big internal fear of being misgendered. There's this tremendous internal fear in so many of you for being seen as not really a woman, for not being validated for who you are. So as a result, your imposter feelings tend to go skydive through the roof. As a result, your just overall internal fear of being perceived something that you're not exponentially increases. When our fears increase, when your fears especially increase, guess what? It will undoubtedly affect dysphoria. And if you are experiencing gender dysphoria, your dysphoria is going to also increase because of the stressors associated with the fear linked to social transition. So social transition brings up a lot of things in people. In my experience working with trans women, social transition brings up a lot of resistance. It brings up a lot of tension. It brings up a lot of even internalized transphobia. That's right. That, all of the things you internalized, that the world have told you, all this negative messaging and ideas they have told you about you as a trans woman, that you now internalized and holding on as your own. It's going to bring up all of those things. For this reason, social transition is one of the hardest things to do. Another reason why it's so challenging for so many of you to do is because it is considered almost like this first I would say, first doorway into your authentic living, in the sense that, well, once you start presenting, for a lot of people it feels like, if I start showing up as my authentic self, then that means that's it, I'm living my life. Once you take that step, it feels like you are now really out there living and exploring, and sometimes a lot of people feel like there's no point back. So for a lot of people, this is a very significant threshold to cross over as part of their ownership of the self, acceptance of the self, living their truth, and as well as taking control of your life and doing something for yourself. So it's a really important element in gender transition. Starting hormones is incredibly important, don't get me wrong. But starting hormones is something you experience on internal plane, especially psychologically, as gender dysphoria tends to quiet down. Social transition is now an external thing, right? Social is now, you're letting the world know, you are showing up in your whole being. And that's equally important, but it's important in a different regard. And one of the challenges of it is because of the visibility. Right now, especially in the United States, in the UK especially too, in so many other parts of the world, social transition is much more challenging for so many trans women because the stigma, the hatred, the negativity, the attempts to eradicate transgender experience are incredibly high. All of you know this. I do not need to be telling you all of this. And for that reason, a lot of people I work with even are terrified of starting to step into social transition because they're afraid that right now the environment is so hostile. There's a possibility for hate crimes. There's possibility for getting hurt. Safety becomes a huge concern. So to start off analyzing fears related to social transition, if for those of you watching your primary fear is safety related, that is a very important fear to pay attention to, because I do not want any of you to get hurt. And I have an opinion that this is just me, my 2 cents, it's not worth it to get hurt at expense of completely being out there as yourself in the world. Because if safety is genuinely a concern, and I'm talking about safety as in you might genuinely get very hurt, that's quite a concern, right? Because safety should be paramount. Safety should be a primary thing. So if you are right now in an environment where if you go out and you are going to be perceived or seen as a trans person, and you might experience hate crime that is putting you in danger, my suggestion is hold back on social transition until you are in a place or environment where it is safer, or follow up some of the steps I'm going to suggest that are very small. Because again, safety always has to be concerned. So for some of you, your primary fear related to safety, do think it through. If, however, and this I find for a lot of people, I find that a lot of people, at least, I'm licensed in, even though I've seen out people all over the world as a gender specialist, I'm based primarily in California. I see a lot of people from Texas. I see a lot of people from Florida and a lot of people from New York City. And I also see a lot of people from all over the country. What I find out working with so many people is that a lot of people are actually in environments and in spaces that are pretty safe. Meaning, probably the most negative things that they could get if they're seen as a trans person is somebody looking at them with judgment, somebody maybe even saying something negative, which, don't get me wrong, can be incredibly emotionally painful as well. But the chances of them actually getting physically hurt is pretty slim. And so a lot of people hold on to this fear when in reality it's quite safe where they're at to start living their lives. Remember, when you're going through gender transition, it is very natural for a lot of you to experience a lot of resistance regardless toward transition. Even if that's something you recognize that you need to survive, and even if gender transition is something you recognize as you want or desire, there's always going to be a lot of resistance, because transition, for a lot of you know this because you're adults, you're not children, you understand, is not a walk in the park. You know that there's lots of challenges that come with transition. There's also a lot of fears attached to a lot of challenges. As a result, for that primary reason, for a lot of you, gender transition is going to be something that is always going to be met with some element of resistance. Anytime we have resistance, our mind tries to come up with reasoning, justifications, rationalizations to keep us in a place that we perceive as safe. This is very important for a lot of you to realize. For a lot of you who are actually in environment, in places that are quite safe, where you can start slowly socially transitioning, and if you're holding yourself back because your mind keeps telling yourself, I'm going to get hurt, I'm going to get hurt, ask yourself, how much of that I'm going to get hurt is your resistance token? How much of that something is going to happen to me is now your mind justifying to maintain perception of safety? And how much of that is affecting your overall transition? Because here's the thing, at some point, you all are going to have to socially start living your life, right? You can't always live in a closet. You can't always live in the proximity and privacy of your homes. And part of transition, the very important part, is the social aspect of it. And it's important because you are evolving into your authentic selves, and part of that evolution involves living amongst other people, because we don't exist in a vacuum and none of us live off the grid. And if you do, well then the sphere should not even be related to you, right? So recognize that resistance is going to be natural. But I just really want to challenge all of you who thinks it's so unsafe to genuinely ask yourself, is your environment truly unsafe? Or do you feel that it is very unsafe because of all of the negative news you're hearing? I have a lot of clients that I work with who based here in California, in Los Angeles, where I live, and a lot of them live within like 5 miles from my office. And I know that the environment is safe because I live in the same environment. I understand the culture and the context of the neighborhoods that they live in. And yet I have those clients who are so terrified. They think that something is going to happen to them. And so it's really important to sit down and acknowledge how much of this fear is fed from social media and everything else we're being bombarded with about trans individuals. And this is not about dismissing legitimate fears, but this is about realistically assessing your situations. And also by realistically assessing your situations, you are not allowing fear to be the boss of you. You're not allowing the fear to control and navigate your life and your decisions. You putting yourself in control of those things. And that's really, really important. So for individuals who are ready to step into social transition and start presenting as authentic selves, my number one tip of what in my experience is to avoid. Now, if you feel like this tip doesn't resonate with you and you still would like to do this, please by any means go for it. In my personal experience, I found that a lot of people do this and it backfires on them. A lot of people do this and it actually makes them drop everything a lot of times, convince themselves that they will never transition, stop their gender transition altogether. And this one thing is this: stepping into social transition and going from zero would be you haven't yet presented yet, or presented very minimally in the privacy of your home and secrecy, to a whole 100. 100 meaning your full feminine presentation. A lot of people do this. They go from 0 to 100 because they feel, and it makes sense, they feel that I'll just rip the Bandaid, right? I will just go out there and do it, and I just fully, completely present as myself. Makes complete sense logically. There's a lot of things to transition that is not logical, and a lot of things that require and demand and almost situated in a way where little steps build up on other steps, because it is situated in such a way to help you build resilience and self-confidence. When I see people go from 0 to 100, what happens is that, first of all, in my experience, they are not internally ready to own this 100 presentation. They haven't stepped into it yet publicly, they haven't lived it yet, and so there is lack of ownership and confidence. A lot of times people hope that they're going to go out there, they're going to get validated, and it's going to give them confidence. For some people, what happens, unfortunately, is that they go out there and the minute they experience misgendering, it crushes all of their hopes and beliefs. This reminds me, if you ever read my book, On New Terms, Gender Transition, Redefined for Adults, and if you don't have this book, there's a link down in the description. It is completely free. You can get free full PDF copy of the book. I talk about this in a book, in a chapter where I say, build houses, not castles. And the analogy that I make is that castle is, in this case, would be your castle is going from 0 to 100. The full presentation is your full castle. And when misgendering happens, your whole castle crumbles. And you feel so devastated and hurt, and you feel like you have nothing left. If you take small steps towards social transition that I'm going to be talking about in a bit, what you're doing is that you're building little houses instead of one big castle. You're accumulating little houses, and as a result, you have an entire village. By the time you're ready to present and you go out, if you get misgendered, only one of your houses crumbles. You have 20 more standing because you have built confidence over time. So yes, misgendering is still going to hurt. It's still going to affect your confidence, but not to the point where it's going to all crumble. And not to the point where by all of it crumbling, it's going to make you want to just completely stop transitioning. So this idea of completely ripping Bandaid and just fully presenting, in my experience, I found this really working for people who genuinely passing is not their goal. They really don't care about passing. They're people who just have very strong sense of self. They don't care at all about what other people think. The validation of others does not concern them at all. It also works really well for people who are very fortunate to have either for these people passing matters, and they have very androgynous, very kind of neither here nor there features that when then they start presenting, it just kind of all fits. But all in all, this ripping Bandaid going from 0 to 100, one of the biggest reasons why I see it backfiring again is because people just psychologically not ready. Just not ready to fully kind of feel even good internally about themselves. So one of the things that I do recommend when you're starting social transition, my throat is so, I've been recording videos and I start losing my voice when I speak a lot. So one of the things that I do recommend, and you've seen this in quite a few of my videos, is to actually start hormones, feminizing hormones, before social transition. Give feminizing hormones, especially, this is for all of you who want feminizing hormones first and foremost, because that's not a must. Let's be very clear about it. I cannot stress that enough. But give feminizing hormones about several months, maybe like a month or 2 months, and then slowly start social transition. Why do I recommend this? Because feminizing hormones are going to quiet down dysphoria. They're going to take down the notch of the mental fog, all the chatter. It's going to make you think more clearly. It's going to make you feel much more calmer. It's going to also affirm that you are on the right path, and it's going to make you feel better. When we are feeling better, when our mind is more clear, we are much more ready and in a better position to not only come out, but to socially start living as ourselves. I know this is not possible in some parts of the world because people are still sticking to very outdated gender, I can't even call it gender care because it doesn't sound like care, it sounds like gender negligence at this point, where practitioners require you a whole year to present as your authentic gender. So in this case, to present as women before you can even start hormones, which is, in my opinion, is insanity because it puts so many of you at risk. It is it's just not optimal way to go. And without the hormones to help you combat dysphoria, that just makes everything that much more difficult. So I understand that this advice, starting feminizing hormones first, may not be applicable to all of you. But if you can, that is a great way to start. Now, the other great tip if you are feeling like you're getting ready to socially present, is to start slow. Again, the biggest thing about starting slow is more about you psychologically building that inner confidence, that inner, not only confidence, but also relationship to your feminine, relationship to your womanhood. It gives you time to assimilate within yourself. It gives you time to also to explore and further to solidify and figure out who you are as a woman. Now, small baby steps might not be conducive to all of you. Some of you may have stepped into social transition without any of this, and that's just fine. Again, there's no one size fits all advice here. Take what works and leave what does not. The way that I recommend small steps stepping into social transition is I recommend so you identify as a trans woman, right? And so whether your goal is to fully pass, whether your goal is to just be your authentic self, I recommend start moving that needle. And usually what I recommend is start moving your presentation needle socially towards the middle. What does it mean? That means you're starting to present more as gender bending, gender blending, gender fluid, a little bit more maybe still of masculine, but a little bit more feminine, more androgynous maybe. You can even consider non-binary, if you will, but you're moving toward this middle where as you take those steps, you're minimizing any potential of the negative effect that you're so afraid to receive. Misgendering, stigma, feeling invalidated by people out there. And also this every little steps making you feel acclimate to the steps you're taking towards your feminine self, and as a result, you start becoming more confident. Once you get to the middle and you feel confident and comfortable, keep pushing the envelope little by little to whatever your full feminine presentation is, right? Again, the externalization of your authentic womanness is going to be different for you than it is for somebody else. And you're going to have to figure out what that is for you. Some women, they are very hyper femme. They have their own very hyper femme style. Some women have more sporty aesthetic. Some women have more femme fatale aesthetic. Some women have more classy aesthetics. There's so many aesthetics. Some have goth, some have punk. There's so many amazing aesthetics to externalize ourselves, right? I mean, just even look for me through the duration of being on this channel, right? If you have seen my other Monday video, you have seen that I did this whole vampy makeup look, which is different from my black eyeliner and red classic lip, right? So there's all these parts of ourselves that we as women would like to externalize. What is your aesthetic? So you keep pushing your envelope closer to that aesthetic and closer until you get to the point where now you're fully externalizing yourself. And by the time you're fully externalizing yourself, what should happen by the time is that you should feel more confident and more assertive about who you are, because you've done it in little steps. You build it little houses, right? Instead of one big castle. You have all of these little experiences that solidify your sense of self. So now that you're living fully expressed, things still might happen. I mean, we live in a world where everybody's so paranoid about gender. We hear now on the news that people who are even cis are getting kicked out of the bathrooms because somebody thought that they're trans. Like, people don't even know what to look for anymore when they look at especially women. I get people constantly say, I can tell you're not a woman. It's like the paranoia out there is off the charts. And people are paranoid to such extent where the only idea of a woman for them is like this particular idealized sense of woman, which doesn't really exist. So as you are fully over here, you still might experience things. Like I said, people are paranoid. They're just plain stupid. Let me just put it that way. And I've been misgendered. I am misgendered constantly. Now I get it. That's because people look at my content and they're like, oh, she's talking about trans people, so she got to be trans herself, and then they just go on off the skid. But the ignorance there is very, very large. So things still might happen to you. But remember, your whole castle is not going to crumble because you have built yourself from the ground up. Imagine each step as a foundation, a brick, a foundation you're building toward your house, and your house being your full self. This is my best tip to approaching social transition. Everybody I work with, regardless whether their goal is to fully pass or their goal is I just want to feel like myself or I just want to be my authentic self, I always walk my clients through this slow building step because it has proven to me again and again to help build strong internal resilience, strong sense of self, sense of confidence. Again, can you rip a Bandaid? Of course you can. Just the reality is that a lot of you are not going to be able to do that because when you spend years and years and years living with gender dysphoria, decades for a lot of you have struggled with internal beliefs that you're not good enough, and a lot of you have internalized shame and guilt and self-loathing. When we self-loathe ourselves or have a tendency to not like ourselves, the need for external validity is going to be very, very high. When we don't get that external validation, we get deeply crushed. So this is why it's just so common to, ripping the Bandaid. It just doesn't work for a lot of people because, it's like you're taking yourself out for the first time, and of course you want to be seen. Of course you don't want to get hurt. And of course you want to be loved. All of those are things all of us desire. And people are just cruel. A lot of you say that the social transition part reminds you of high school, right? Where you're going through puberty or you're just, going through this life development path, and it's a whole pick me phenomenon, or it's a whole, you're going to be laughed at, you're going to be made fun of because you don't fit with the rest of the kids, or you're not popular enough, or you're not whatever. Yeah, it kind of probably does feel like high school, except now as adults, don't forget, you are much more equipped to go through this phase because you're mature. And you have lived a life. And you have seen and experienced things. Don't forget that. So hopefully this is helpful in terms of how to approach it, how to build that foundation, how to also pay attention to, is your fear genuinely talking about safety concern, or is your fear not safety concern related, but you perceive it as such? How can you actually evaluate and assess your fears and see what's really going on? Comment below, how did you approach social transition? Comment below and share whether you did the ripping Bandaid. Did it work out for you? Did it backfire at you? What did you experience? Share any kind of tips and guidance you have for fellow trans women, for fellow trans sisters, on how to approach social transition, how to also work through those fears that work for you. Remember, the YouTube is starting to become really kind of a community portal for so many of you, and it's incredibly important to share your experiences so that the others can read and can have a takeaway from those experiences. Other than that, I wish you all to have an amazing day, and I will see you all in the next video. Goodbye.